What's up guys, my name is Julie and this is the Curated Curvy, where I bring you along for the journey as I attempt to create the curated wardrobe of my dreams with these two hands. Today I have for you a pattern review for McCalls 8036. With this pattern I changed quite a lot about it. Some of the modifications that I made to the pattern before I get into the nitty-gritty details of what the pattern was like to sew and all that jazz is, I added a neck ruffle to the pattern. I added one ruffle to the bottom. I sheared the bottom of the sleeve, and I think that is about it. Now, for the pattern itself, this is my third time actually trying to make this pattern and my first time being successful in making it, which means that for me, this pattern didn't make a lot of sense out of the gate. I think initially I had issues with fitting. The first time I made this pattern, I tried to do the asymmetrical buttons and that didn't work for me. It was too tight. The second time I tried to make it, I think I attempted to do it as a basic wrap dress and the top wrap for me just wasn't wrapping correctly. The third time I tried to make it, which was this time, I had a lot more experience under my belt as I tried to make this when I first started sewing versus now where I've been sewing for a year. So some of the things that I did to make it work was I cut the top bodice out in a straight size 18. The pattern suggests that I cut out a size 20, but it just wasn't fitting correctly for me, and so I sized down to a size 18 and I used a half an inch seam allowance. For the arm side of the pattern, I think I took off about close to a half an inch of the top arm side because it was coming too far over to my shoulders, and for a nice puffy sleeve you want that sleeve to sit right where your shoulder begins, which for me was a little bit further in than the pattern suggested. The next thing that I changed is for the bottom of this pattern, I added ease into the front and the back of the skirt through the slash and spread method, which is basically where you find the grain of the pattern and then you mark a few lines, you cut those lines, spread the pattern, and then add a piece of paper underneath and tape it back together. That gave me a nice fit over my hips where the pattern isn't too straight and I have just a nice amount of ease to where I can move around and I can feel comfortable in the dress. Would I sew this pattern again? Honestly, I don't know, because while I do really like the finished garment, I'm not crazy over the bodice of the pattern. The pattern has a dart that comes from the shoulder down to here. And I don't know why, but this dart just never really worked well for me, because at the end of the dart I have extra ease in the bodice that I'm not too sure what to do about. I mean, I could fold it over and create another dart in the bodice just to give me like that nice fitted bodice that I'm looking for, but I don't really want to do that. It's not enough to bother me to where I won't wear the dress, and so I feel like just leave good enough alone. If I sew this pattern again, I will keep the sleeves and the skirt and swap out the bodice for another wrap front that hopefully has a better fit and not these darts on the top. Also for this dart, I sewed mine completely down, whereas I know that you're just supposed to leave it as a dart and let it be open, but that would have been even more ease in the bodice area than I was looking for, so I definitely did not do that. The next thing with this pattern that I mentioned before I changed is I added a neck ruffle to the front. I did this by cutting out two pieces of fabric that were 58 inches long and 4 inches wide. I gathered them, attached it, sewed it on. It was really easy to do. And I also added lace to the edge of the neck ruffle. There's lace on the edge of the sleeve, and then there's lace on the edge of the skirt just to mimic the dress that I was trying to create when I made this pattern. With the neck ruffle, the neck there's a lot of ease here, and that's another issue that I have with this pattern that I don't quite know how to fix. My solution was to add a piece of elastic running all the way around the neckline for the bodice, and that gathered that in a lot for me and keeps it much more closed than it would be initially, because it was gaping, and it was gaping pretty wildly, and it wasn't something that I was comfortable with. So while I do love the finished outcome of this dress, and it is something that I think I'll get a lot of wear out of, I wouldn't do it again in this particular way. As I mentioned, I'd change the bodice and keep the skirt and keep the sleeves. This dress was supposed to be based off of a doen dress that I saw on their website, and I think I came pretty close to the essence of that dress. I do want to do this again when I swap out the bodice and keep the ruffle and lengthen the skirt just to get a little bit closer to my inspiration picture, and I'll update you guys with that. All right, so that is it for this portion. Now really quickly, I just want to lay out the pattern pieces for you so you get a good idea of what I did and the changes that I made to it. This is the back, and it's just to show you with the arm size. So this is the line for 14, for size 14, and I cut all the way basically into that size 14 line, and then tapered out just a little bit right here. But for the shoulder portion, you see I had to take that all the way in to get it to sit nicely on my shoulder. And the same was done here for the front of the sleeve. Only difference is in the front, I left a little bit more ease here. When I was doing my fitting, this is just what I determined and where I marked the lines on my body, so that is based off of how I cut it. Okay, so here is the front wrap. So this is the two front pieces of the wrap skirt, and this is the original piece, and then this is the piece after I slashed and spread it. So you can still kind of see the lines that I made going down the pattern, and then I just spreaded it out and put some fabric in between. Here I didn't slash and spread, or I did slash and spread, but I didn't open up the pieces and move them apart. Here I just added ease because I didn't want to change this seam of the pattern. And then once I was done slash and spreading it, I realized that I wanted it to be a little bit longer, so I went ahead and I added an extra however many inches that is across the front of the skirt. And this is what the back of the skirt looks like. So again, slash and spread, and then added that extra length to the bottom portion of the skirt. This is the sleeve, and I forgot to mention this when I was going over it, but the sleeve does call for it to be pleated on the top. When I tried this pattern before, I didn't like those pleats. I felt like they were a bit too fiddly. So what I did when cutting this out is I ignored these lines and I just did it straight across, and then I gathered the top of the sleeve. The bottom of the sleeve has a cuff to go with it. This cuff was too tight for me when I tried it on initially, so I eliminated the cuff, and then I did 6 rows of shearing along the bottom of the sleeve. Pretty much it for this make. I do feel like I came pretty close to recreating the essence of the dress. I don't feel like it was as spot on as it could be. I do want to do this again in a lighter, more drapey, fluid, but still nice and stiff fabric. So we'll stay tuned for that. Anyways, if you stayed this far, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Stay beautiful and make great things.